Hello and welcome to Global News Factory. I'm your host, Vikrant. We are covering three major topics today. The first one, Angela Merkel just spilled the beans. She reveals how it was actually NATO states that blocked peace before the Ukraine war even began. We will show how Western headlines sold you a cartoon while diplomacy was quietly killed. Then we have Zelensky's grand claim. He says, "We will join EU with or without Orban." It is time to show him his place again. The club decides, not the guest. And we close with a twist you will love. A NATO member country eyeing India and Russia's BrahMos missile to shut down Turkish aggression. Speed, shock, balance, a BRICS-flavored message to the war lobby. So, let's begin the show. I always get this question in the comment box. Hey Vikrant, it was Russia who attacked Ukraine first, 3 years ago. How can you say the West is the aggressor? So, today, let's settle this debate. Who is the aggressor? Listen to the people who were actually in the room. Not me, not Sebastian Sas, not think tank poets, Angela Merkel. Former German chancellor, the lady who held Europe together with duct tape and coffee. She just said the quiet part out loud that Poland and the Baltic states helped block talks with Russia before the Ukraine war began, when a last-minute EU-Russia hotline might still have mattered. Her own words, I'm quoting her exactly, "In June 21, I felt that Putin was no longer taking the Minsk Agreement seriously. And that is why I wanted a new format where we could speak directly with Putin as the European Union." Then she adds, "Not everyone supported this, above all the Baltic states, but Poland was also against it." Unquote. Translation: she wanted EU-level talks with Putin. A year before the big explosion, Warsaw and the Baltics slammed the door. That is not my hot take, that is Merkel's cold record. Now let me now address the claim that Putin was not taking the Minsk Agreement seriously. Okay, if you remember, until a year before the Ukraine war began, there was a large crisis in Donbas region. It fueled after Kiev regime started targeting Russian-speaking people there. It was an attack on the Russian culture. It was an attempt to curb the deep-rooted Russian culture. And this is when the self-proclaimed People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk, they had appealed to Moscow for help. Now, in response, that's the key word, in response to those appeals, Moscow had to launch this operation, this war inside Ukraine. So this is the context that people seem to forget. Anyway, coming back to Merkel's statement, she herself said if anyone was running away from talks, it was these NATO countries and not Putin. Now compare that with the Western headlines you keep getting force-fed. For example, this: why Putin won't talk, he wants surrender, not peace. And we have this one: Vladimir Putin is not interested in a peace deal. This is how they feed you propaganda. But if one of Europe's top deal makers says the real roadblock was inside the EU, Poland and the Baltics vetoing any serious EU-Kremlin talks, then the cartoon version of events falls apart. Diplomacy was not tried and failed, it was blocked and buried. That is the truth Merkel has just revealed. Merkel even told you why the blocking brigade did it. What was the reason? Not because dialogue is evil, but because dialogue is risky for NATO's PR. If the EU sat with Putin, some NATO and EU states might have said no thanks to escalation, and the famous image of total unity would have cracked on live TV. So they deemed it better to keep the theatre going than to test whether peace was still possible. Her line is the definition of adult sense. I'm quoting again. If you cannot meet, if you cannot discuss differences face to face, you won't find new compromises. You know this from your daily life. If you refuse to talk to your neighbor, don't act shocked when the fence gets higher and the dog gets louder. Now, as soon as Merkel spilled those inconvenient beans, Poland got a panic attack. We got a statement from Mateusz Morawiecki, who is former Polish Prime Minister, and he called Angela Merkel one of the most harmful German politicians to Europe in the last century, unquote. In the last century. Easy there, Mr. Historian. That is not a rebuttal, that is a meltdown. And then came the tabloid version, Daily Mail. Oh my god, they wrote a very long piece which cried about Merkel blocked Ukraine's NATO membership, Merkel funded Russia, Merkel caused winters, Merkel ate my homework. All that BS in that article. The truth is that the same people who blocked talks then, 4 years back, they're blocking talks now. They tell you that negotiations reward aggression while the war chews through budgets, shells, economies, and a generation. They promise victory soon while admitting in footnotes that air defenses miss, lines bend, and stockpiles gasp. And every time someone whispers ceasefire framework, the outrage machine boots up like clockwork. So the next time a brave keyboard warrior shouts, Russia attacked, case closed, reply with Merkel's receipts. She tried to open an EU Kremlin channel. Poland and the Baltics blocked it. She warned that without face-to-face discussions, you won't find new compromises, and they chose no discussion, no compromise, and maximum moral theater. And then they blamed her, Merkel, for telling you what happened. What a clown show again. Moving on, it is time to pull Zelensky out of his dream cloud and back to earth. He walked on stage with full swagger and announced, Ukraine will be in the European Union with or without Orban because that is the choice of the Ukrainian people. Cute line, big energy, but basic reality check. You don't invite yourself into the EU. The hosts decide the EU is the club, Ukraine is the applicant. Your choice only matters after the EU says yes. And then he went further and practically leaked the playbook. Changing the procedure means finding a way without Hungary. When the majority, all the countries except Hungary, support Ukraine, they understand how this needs to be done. Translation? If Hungary says no, change the rules and call it democracy. That is not European values, that is moving the goalposts while the referee looks away. If this is the plan, then Brussels is not a union anymore, it is a bypass machine. Hungary is in the EU. Hungary pays for the party and cleans the mess after. Hungarians have the right to say who joins the club they pay for. That is how a union works. If a new guest wants in, current members must agree. If they don't, you do the hard work, fix corruption, fix rule of law, fix borders, fix budget math, fix fatigue with endless war headlines. Screaming at Orban won't fix any of that. It just proves you have no homework, only slogans. And you saw that arrogance in Zelensky's tone? That does not come from nowhere. It smells like a green light from Brussels elites who are desperate to look tough while their economies wheeze. They think they can muscle Orban out after next year's vote or ram through reforms to dilute the veto if Orban survives. Either they beat him at the ballot box with a media blitz and saintly articles, or they change the rules and call it reforms. Heads they win, tails you lose. That is the plan Zelensky himself just revealed. He even admitted the core political truth, without meaning to, of course. He's a comedian, so he is supposed to make these mistakes. He said Hungary blocks Ukraine because of domestic reasons. Oh, exactly my point. In a democracy, voters are the domestic reason. Hungarians worry about cost, migration, crime, energy, and a war with no end. They look at their bills and ask, why should we bankroll a state that needs more oversight than a bank heist? That is not Kremlin propaganda, that is kitchen table math. And here is why the recent result in Czechia matters. A leader just won on a platform that does not support Ukraine's EU membership and wants to end the shell buying circus. So, my point is, even if Brussels somehow sidelines Orban, sidelines Hungary, Prague can still plant a boot on the brake. And Brussels, you should be careful too. If you nuke the veto to force this one case, the whole EU changes shape. Today it is Hungary in the crosshairs, tomorrow it will be any country that steps out of line on migration, energy, agriculture, industry, you name it. Central Europe is not blind, they see the pattern. Unity means do as we say. They also see the price tag. Ukraine's accession is not just a flag photo, it is a fiscal volcano. Common budget transfers, foreign policy shock, rebuilding costs, security guarantees. You can call it historic. Taxpayers call it the bill. Moving on, our next story is super interesting. A NATO country wants to buy a Russian-Indian missile from India. Yes, you heard that right. Greece is eyeing the BrahMos missile, the supersonic cruise missile that is co-developed by India and Russia to stare down its favorite enemy, which is Turkey. If irony were a weapon, this deal would already be operational. So here is the setup. Athens is fed up of Turkish aggression in its waters. Greek media is now openly saying what generals say in private: buy BrahMos. Why? Because BrahMos is fast, low and mean. It sprints at supersonic speed, hugs the sea and ruins the day of anything that floats or hides on a coastline. It is the difference between warning shots and don't test me. You don't negotiate much when your radar has 5 seconds to live. Now understand the regional equation first, okay, before moving on. Turkey and Azerbaijan are moving like a tag team against BRICS countries. Baku has been swinging at Russian interests while smiling for Western cameras, and we have Ankara. It is busy shipping weapons to Ukraine and Pakistan, helping keep the India-Pakistan front warm, and they have both fed Ukraine's war machine over the past years. Turkey is working against China as well. In February this year, Turkish intelligence claimed, you can see that report on your screen, claimed that Ankara should jeopardize Chinese economic interests so that Turkey can benefit from it. So you have Turkey versus BRICS, you have Turkey versus Greece also, Azerbaijan versus Armenia, you have Pakistan versus India, and a little poke at China for desert. This is not a calm neighborhood. It is a 3-ring circus with live ammo. Enter Greece, a NATO member that suddenly talks like a BRICS fan club. Buying BrahMos from India would be a stern message to this new war lobby of Turkey, of Azerbaijan, of Pakistan. Will Ankara complain? Of course, they will call it provocative while their own factories hum. Will Baku frown? Naturally, they prefer neighbors who show up unarmed. Will certain EU officials try to wag a finger? Always, they do. But that should not derail Greece BRICS cooperation. India should take the call, name a fair price, and pack the crates. Greece gets a backbone at sea, Armenia gets breathing room on land, the region gets balance, which is the boring word for peace, and the axis of evil gets a reality check, the kind that moves at supersonic speed and ends argument before they begin. That is Super Moss for you. And that is all for now. Thank you very much for being with me. You're watching GNF.